Hello there. Welcome to another episode of Broadcast Bros. I'm your host Jake, my co-host Joe.
Hello there.
Hey Joe. So today it's just gonna be us. Lee is dead in a ditch somewhere, MIA. We don't know where he is. He'll show up eventually, sometime. Justin's gotta work, so it's just gonna be me and Joe today. Joe,
hmm
today we're gonna talk a little bit about books. A couple things that we're interested in, stories that we like, and what we think makes a good story. And if we were to write one, because that's something Joe and I always talked about, writing our own separate stories. How we go about it, where do we take our inspiration from? Does that sound good to you, Joe?
Sounds great.
All right. Before we begin, first on the agenda, I have to shit.
Oh my
S-
God.
so we're gonna take a little break here, a little commercial break, and I'm gonna go poop, and then we'll be back.
Wow. All right. Great start. Let's go.
All right, so I'll be back in a couple minutes here.
While we're waiting, if any of you out there have loved ones, family members, or you yourself have the need for Preparation H, I highly recommend it for all your hemorrhoid needs. Taking these large poops that we do, it puts a strain on your butthole. So if you or your family suffer from hemorrhoids, Preparation H. Stick it up there. Feel the breeze, baby. All right. Now that we got that commercial out of the way, hashtag ad. We're gonna wait for Jake to take his notoriously quick poops, and he'll be back in for the conversation. We're gonna be talking about books today, a little different from our last two episodes. I know Jake and I have been, well, at least for the last year, we've actually been writing our own books, but life gets in the way, and some of us are doing some big things in school. Other of us have other jobs, so it's tough to get through. But we do have two book ideas each already, in the planning process. So I'll have Jake talk about his, and if he's willing, of course, and I'll talk about mine. But yeah, so I'm excited to get chat with you guys about books. Uh, After you guys watch the video or before, whatever you guys do, if you have a book that you really like reading, or if you guys have any series that you want us to read or talk about, leave them in the comments, wherever this is going to be posted. Let us know what you guys think about these books that we're discussing as well, and we'll be happy to chat about them in one of our future episodes. But yeah, we're always happy for you guys' input. Definitely helps us out when creating content. And yeah, we appreciate your support.
All right,
All three of you. Oh,
I'm back.
moon landing. We're back, baby.
Oh, a little out of breath. I ran. I accidentally put the toilet paper not in arm's reach, so I had to like waddle over it, and I almost tripped and fell. It was pretty bad. But
Oh,
we're
so you like
back.
squished the remnants between the cheeks when you stood up? Oh, God.
It was
It's like the trash
messy.
compactor scene in A New Hope.
Yeah, it was like that, except there were only two people inside, not three.
All right, that's good.
All
That's for
right,
the best, probably.
yeah. So books. Um,
All right, so while you were away, just so you know, I kind of prefaced this conversation that you and I had been kind of picking at writing our own books for like the last year,
mm,
and we both had a few stories that we're discussing. So maybe close to the end of the video, if we're both willing, we'll chat about one of our stories, ideas that we were working on.
yeah, all right. If you want to talk about your book, I'm not going to stop you.
Okay, so you want to start with our inspirations to why we got into this path of wanting to write?
Yeah. If I want to start, I've always been kind of a writer. When I was younger, I'd write a lot of short stories, just about random things, and that was an aspect that I really liked about, you know, I, about reading in general. Yeah, I read a lot. You get these ideas for this nice creative story, all these elements and how there are all these moving parts that work together. And I was like, yeah, I really want to do that. So I started writing. As I got in, the high school and college, and now I'm in, med school, so I can't really write anymore. But it's something that always in the back of my mind, I always want to work on and kind of just have a creative outlet. So that's really what writing was for me for a while. In terms of like inspirations, I grew up reading the Harry Potter books. Just big fantasy worlds that I just fell in love with because you can just J.K. Rowling just did a really good job of making this nice world, and you feel like you could really just insert yourself into the story and just kind of live as a wizard essentially, and I love that, right? So I try to that's why I really appreciate good world building is just because you can kind of insert yourself into the story and then go from there. So that's something that I would want to be really good at, but I don't know how, right? So world building is really tough. So I read, George R. R. Martin, Game of Thrones, another example, great world building. Lord of the Rings, great world building. And that's something that I really appreciate, and I think that you can really do in kind of like that fantasy genre. So that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the element that I would want to write in. It's kind of a fantasy fictional story, with a little bit more of a twist, right? Um, so do you want me to talk about that, or do you want to go into yours first, and then we'll kind of go back and forth?
Nah, man, hit us with a twist. What do you got?
So I'm a big horror nerd. I love horror movies. I think they are all terrible, but I think that they
Oh,
are
oh,
very
hey,
charming in that. Hot take. Yeah, I think,
charming.
yeah. I mean, I'm not big on gore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gore or like shock, and I think that's what a lot of horror movies rely on. Like the
Okay.
big jump scares and things like that. I love horror and how it makes me feel, right? That adrenaline pumping, you're kind of on the edge of your seat because it's just slowly building tension and you don't know where it's going. And I think that all stories should be like that. So, but I think that kind of a basis of stories that does that really well is cosmic horror, right? So Lovecraftian horror. So H.P. Lovecraft, wrote these stories about horror that didn't use the elements of gore or shock, which I really appreciated, right? Instead, it's a subgenre of fiction. It emphasizes the unknown, right? Unknown or the
Mm-hmm.
incomprehensible, and how scary that could be, and how scary what we don't know can be, right? It's kind of like fear itself. Like what's fear? I think that you could argue with philosophers for hours what fear is, but I think that they'll come up with some form of the definition of like it's the unknown, basically. You don't know what's going to happen, and then that creates a fight or fight response, and you feel fear. Lovecraftian does a great job of kind of taking that to a whole new level through like existential dread. It's like you can't hope to stop what's happening. You just kind of have to live with it or try to adapt to exist in that world. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm really fascinated with mental health. My background was in neuroscience, and you learn a lot about the brain and mental health and like leading to insanity, and I think that ties in really well with that. So all those aspects together, like Lovecraftian horror and how horror makes me feel tied with great world building, I think would make for an excellent story, and that's kind of the basis of what I want to write about. So, Joe, what about you?
Um, I've been interested in telling a story for my whole life, really. Even growing up, I was always making like short videos with my family when my parents would let me like take a video camera, and I've just always been interested in conveying a message, and the most important part is making sure people feel something when I do something, like getting a reaction out of people, not like shock and like, haha, that's so funny. Like making sure somebody comes away from anything I do with emotion, not emotional growth, but just emotion. I'll say, just keep it simple. I've always found that very rewarding and fulfilling. And over time, after reading so many books, I just realized I would love to make the next generation of young adults, or any age, but I would say predominantly young adults, make them feel like I felt when I was reading books would be probably one of the best things I could ever do in my life. You know, reading when I was young, I probably read the Percy Jackson series the most. Um, if you only know Percy Jackson's name from the TV show that's coming up or the movies that they made, I'm sorry for you. Those are horrible. I'd be willing to say that in front of anyone. They're just bad, bad movies. But the books themselves that they're based off of are phenomenal. I think they make a world that you can plop yourself right into. The characters are relatable enough so you can feel like you're one of them and you're included, but they're extraordinary enough that you feel like you can escape the mundaneness of everyday life. And that's the sweet spot I want to find in my books. I want to make a story that people can relate to, but it takes their mind off of the day to day stress and rigor and boredom that comes with being human. And that's really where I want to write. But also, I didn't read the Game of Thrones books. I'll admit that right now. But I've watched hours and hours and hours of George R. R. Martin interviews, and I just love hearing why he makes choices for writing, and what he finds compelling and stuff. And he mentions a lot in his interviews that he likes writing morally gray characters. So not black and white, not good and bad, but like somewhere in between. And that's that in between, that gray is the essence of humanity. So I think while my sweet spot is, you know, relatable, extraordinary characters, I would love to maybe mature them from those, say, Percy Jackson books, include some of those gray areas and gray characters, and make people question things like morals and beliefs and what they would do in instances. So making a, let's say, a slightly more mature young adult novel would be my dream. Absolutely, I would love to do that.
Do you know kind of what genre you would write in?
Yeah, it'd probably be fantasy because, like you said, not to steal your lines, but the writing a like world building would be so rewarding. Just creating a world that people want to be in, like Harry Potter. Everyone wants to be a wizard, right? And Star Wars, you want to be a Jedi or a Sith. There's these worlds that have been so detailed and meticulously created. I would love to be able to do that for people, just to give them a world that they can escape into. But I don't really see myself doing much different, honestly. Like maybe historical fiction. I've always been a big history guy, but that's definitely way lower on the list. Probably just a fantasy book would be my top tier.
Yeah, I think fantasy books, like I said before, just have so much to offer in terms of an escape from reality. Because that's really what you want.
Yes,
It's you're watching a TV show, you're reading a book, you're playing a video game. You just want something different than your normal life, right? And the more you can kind of get sucked into that and then implant yourself into that world and experience it through like the eyes of the character or a, a character you create for yourself in the story, I think just adds to you, the overall immersion, and you just get sucked right in. And that to me is like such an important factor in the story.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, that escapism that you get from sports too, but this I think is the purest form where it's just intellect meeting intellect, creativity meeting creative minds, and letting it grow. It's just a fantastic thing to think of. It makes me happy just thinking about it right now.
Yeah, I know it's just fucking phenomenal. I like what you said about George R. R. Martin too, like the how he, the moral ambiguity of humanity and kind of like the human nature.
Mm.
Such an important thing to draw out in your characters. Because if you have just someone that's just evil, just for the sake of being evil, so boring, right? Or if you have
Oh
someone
yeah.
that's just
Oh,
like always good, always making the right decisions, that can be fine. But they have to have some sort of, it has to like,
dilemma.
yeah, they have this sort of dilemma, or it has to like build on them mentally and be like, well, sometimes always doing what's right might not be the right thing overall. You know what I mean? It just
Exactly.
have to be some kind of challenge because that's what I like with not to like bring back Marvel, but like how like Captain America, his progression overall, he turns into like a goody goody two shoes, and then he starts to like distrust the government, and then he kind of rebels against it through like this his like whole trilogy. We'll talk about our favorite movie trilogies later because I'm pretty sure that's gonna be Lee's favorite. He loves Captain America.
Oh yeah, he does. Oh my
Um,
God.
yeah, but it's just like it's so important to either if you're gonna have a character that starts off just morally good or morally evil, they have to go through some sort of dilemma that either makes them change their worldview or modify it in some
Exactly.
way. And I think that's what a lot of,
Because
yeah, go ahead.
like you, so I don't know if I can say I've taken creative writing classes, but let's just say I've taken like story classes, we'll say plot classes, and it if you draw out for most books the plot line, it starts as a flat line. You have a big arch. It drops back down in an arch. Another small flat line, a little bump, and then the book ends. So if you don't have a change to your protagonist or your main character, your book's just going to be a straight line throughout. You won't have that bump, which represents like tension, conflict, battle. You know, all these important things that make a story compelling. So if you don't have a change to your character, like Iron Man, when he finds out all of his weapons are being used by terrorists, if he didn't find that out, he would have kept being that narcissistic, douchebag the rest of his life, and he just would have kept going, and that's how the story would have began and end. So adding that change to your character, either their physical being, the way they think about things, or you question their morality. If you don't have that, there's no story. So, like Jake said, it's important to put in those moments of wavering if you're a good guy or questioning yourself if you're a bad guy, any of that stuff. But it's really important to have.
Yep. Normal is boring. Don't make your characters normal.
Normal is boring.
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing worse when you like, you know, if we're gonna talk about really greatly written characters that ended on a sour note, you know, I'd say Jaime Lannister is probably the most
Oh,
disappointing character I've ever experienced in my whole entire life. Like, um, none of you guys will know this, right? We are huge Game of Thrones fans, not necessarily the HBO Game of Thrones, at least for the last two seasons, but George R. R. Martin's Game of Thrones, and Jaime Lannister is probably the best character in the show, I would say, until the very end. He goes through. He's just ego boy, f's his sister all the time, just like a huge douchebag that everybody in the first like two seasons hates, right? Then he gets kidnapped. Then he gets his arm cut off, and then he just loses everything, right? That made him Jaime Lannister, and it's almost like he becomes a whole new character. And his whole like
mm-hmm.
through the other point of the season is shifting from I'm gonna do what's in the best interest for me to I'm gonna start making decisions in the that are the best interest for the realm in general, right? So that's why he's always asking Cersei. He's like, hey, don't kill all these people. We're gonna need them. You have them on your back. When Daenerys comes, we're gonna need the people's support. And obviously Cersei's a fucking bitch, but we can talk about her later. I I think she's a great character. I just hate her, and I think that's what makes her so great because you're supposed to hate
No, yeah,
her, right?
she is fantastic.
Yeah, a fantastically written character. But Jamie has the redemption, right? He has that whole redemption arc of him just making up for the person he used to be and trying to right that. And then at the end, they just have him go back to Cersei. I was all for it if he was gonna kill Cersei, but he didn't. He just hugged her, and then they got crushed by rocks, and it was just not befitting of the Jaime Lannister that George R. R. Martin created, and that pissed me off so much because it's like what we're talking about. You have this character; he's traveling on this flat line, and then he hits this bump, this huge bump, almost like this insurmountable hurdle, right? And then so he's trying to get over it, right? He gets to the top, right, where he joins up with like Jon Snow's crew. And he's like, we're gonna fight the White Walkers, and then he literally is just like, all right, see ya, and then he runs and just jumps off the hill, right back to where he was.
Yeah, he goes backward.
And it's like, well, like the regression. I understand kind of. I think what they were going for. It's kind of like if the world's gonna end, who do you want to spend your life with? Who do you want to spend the rest of your life with? I think that's where they were trying to get at, maybe. But
I
just
hate that.
done so non-tastefully and against everything that he stood for. He should have been with Tyrion, right?
Ex-
Because that was his anchor the
exactly.
entire time. And it's just
And they made it where they revealed that he killed the Mad King to save people's lives. So it turns out he was mostly, I mean, he was a douche, don't get me wrong, but he was a misunderstood douche for the majority of his life. So you start to realize, oh my God, this guy's been doing stuff for the good of the realm, just in like a jerk way his whole life. So that's it. Kind of reveals that he's been a good guy this whole time, and he makes decisions for the good of the many. Then suddenly, after doing that his whole life and suffering the consequences, and that not deterring him, he then decides like screw it. I'm changing my whole life around. I'm doing the exact opposite of what I've been building to and what I've proven that I did my whole life. I'm just gonna go die
yep.
because my growth means nothing.
So that burn them all speech was probably my favorite character moment in the
Oh, it
entire
was
show.
so good.
So
You
powerful.
you feel sympathetic for him. Can you imagine that? He's think about it. You it's tough to say like to think about, but he's an incestual douche. And so you would think he'd be absolutely despised. And by season what? Season four, season three, everyone's like, this guy's not too bad. And eventually, like, yes, Jamie's sick when they pair him with Braun and stuff, and he's just hilarious, and he's a great guy to be around. It seems like. Oh, and it wasn't even like he had to choose. Like, say Darth Vader, it was like all written on the wall. His destiny was saying he was going to change back to light side at the last moment. No, man, there's no destiny for this. It was like, I'm taking everything away from you. I'm taking you away your gold armor and your pomp and circumstance and your best thing attribute, which is your sword hand, and we're gonna see how you turn out. And after all that abuse, he turns out good.
Turns out
And then
great.
all,
Yeah, and
and then all of a sudden, after that crucible, they're like, send him back, send him back.
send him back to the beginning. He learned nothing. It was so disappointing. I mean, we could
Oh, it
talk
was
like
so well
literally
done.
literally all day about you know Game of Thrones and the politics behind why it was rushed. But like that, if
No,
I could change one thing, and I would be, at least somewhat happy with the story, it'd be his character. I was the biggest Jamie Lannister fan from seasons probably 3 to 7,
Mhm.
right? And I thought he was great. Just fantastic character. And then they just kind of, oh man, they took a dump all over him. Took a nice dooski
Here's
right
what
in
I'm gonna
his
say
face.
though. For those of you who are watching House of the Dragon right now, because it's currently out when we're filming this, Jake hasn't seen it yet, so I'm not gonna say anything too specific. But House of the Dragon manages to top something Jamie does in Game of Thrones by 100%. They absolutely obliterate something that he does in Game of Thrones. They take it and do it so much more concentrated in House of the Dragon. And so once Jake sees it, we'll discuss it. But man, oh man, let me tell you, it is potent. We'll say that.
Are you saying like there's a yeah, like there's a better character that goes through the same thing than Jamie?
No, no. Let's just say, how do I say this without giving it away? There's something Jamie is known for, and you would think it would cause a different reaction from the fans, and instead they do it in House of the Dragon. And let me tell you, it hits the way Jamie's should have hit. It hits hard.
All right, yeah, I'll take a look at it. This is a good time to kind of bring this up. Spoilers, by the way. We don't have any spoiler warnings, or we have in the previous episodes, but we're gonna spoil a lot of stuff through the course of this show. Um,
Oh, good point.
and we'll try to maybe we'll post edit them in there, spoiler warning, little intro, so
Yeah, yeah, I can throw that in there.
be like, hey guys, we're gonna be talking about insert topic here. Spoilers if you haven't seen it. We'll just throw
But to
those in
be
there so
fair,
you know.
if we're discussing a topic, I think we're pretty. You should understand we'll be discussing everything, not like, oh yeah, let's do the classified version where we talk about blank, 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 and we can't say blank, blank, blank.
Yep. I mean, yeah. So from here on out, any episode you guys listen to, we'll do a better job. Put them in there. Gonna be spoiling the shit out of everything we talk about. So
But I didn't spoil House of the Dragon. I'm saying that
you
right now.
didn't
I
spoil
didn't.
House of the Dragon. That's true. I so here's the thing. I like can't get into Game of Thrones anymore. I think it like kind of died for me.
Cool. Hey,
And knowing that House of the Dragon was one of the things that caused Game of Thrones to end so abruptly, kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth. I heard it's actually pretty good,
you
and
know, eh, it's not bad. Like so far, it's when you first saw the first few episodes of Game of Thrones, you weren't like, "This is the best show I've ever seen."
that's true.
So it's like this still. But George R. R. Martin just came out in an interview and said House of the Dragon is more Shakespearean play than Game of Thrones is, like a tragedy, a Greek tragedy. So I mean I don't know that to be true yet. 'Cause, I mean obviously I haven't finished the show,
Mhm.
but it is a little differently paced, I will say, and they highlight different things. That's what I'll say.
That's all right. I mean, that could be good. All right, circling back, we're talking about books. Hey, we are talking about TV shows. So talk about books. So, Joe, what's a good book you read recently? One that you really liked enjoyed
Ooh.
for the story, and like, what did you appreciate about the book? What it did right?
So I'm just gonna plug something real quick. This is not a fictional book. It's actually a sports psychology or just a psychology book, and it's called "It Takes What It Takes," and it's written by a famous sports psychologist who works for the NFL and different teams and jumps around, does stuff like that. So if you're ever struggling and you need some not motivation but maybe some structure and how to get that structure and how to turn things around, "It Takes What It Takes" is kind of a good book to read. um, Fiction books, I am currently reading. Oh God, I've taken a little hiatus from reading. I won't lie, but I'm in the middle of book 11 of the Wheel of Time series. Those some of you might know that it's like a Amazon Prime show now or something, but it's a long 15 book series, and I'm on book
Whoa,
11.
wow.
They're long, long 750-page books, and they are at times tedious to read. I will admit. Jake, you've read books where it's like their environmental description is just like almost too much, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
like it goes on
it's
for
one of
pages,
those.
pages and pages and pages to set up like the scene, and then
Oh,
you have like
absolutely.
2 pages of dialogue. Then it's on the next chapter. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is one of those books, I won't lie, especially the first one where it's like describing a town that they live in and you're like, "Oh my God, I know the color and the spots on the back of a butterfly but I couldn't tell you half the people's names. And it is a frustrating read to get into. So I'm not going to say it's like the best, most entertaining book, but what I will say is when the story picks up, it picks up and it grabs you, which I love. And for 11 books I've read so far, it's almost like the written form of the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, because it's so well connected. And there, it's a book that's in multiple perspectives. So each chapter you can change who you're following. And there's like by book 11, there's like 8 people you're following, and they're on different continents or they're this way and that way. So it's so hard to keep those things connected, but they do it beautifully. So if you can manage some dry spots, if you're a reader who can manage some dry spots to get to, really good storytelling, and you're interested in a long series that you want to last you a long time, I definitely recommend Wheel of Time. If you're more of a quick hits person and you just want to be engaged for the entirety of the time, you don't really care about world building, then I would say probably avoid it. But that's the book I'm reading right now. I forget what it's called. It's book 11, Wheel of Time. What about you?
So I've been reading this book for for too long, too long. Um,
Too long.
I think I've talked to you about it before. It's called House of Leaves by
Hmm.
Mark Daniel Whiskey. So, um, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a fantastic read. It's basically a take on going insane, right? So, if I were to give you the quick hit synopsis, right, it's about a guy who finds a manuscript in his neighbor's apartment, and his neighbor was found dead on the floor. He's like this old guy. He finds a manuscript, and he's like, all right, well, there's a note on it that says whoever finds this, edit it, publish it, do whatever you want with it. So he publishes it, and throughout the story is told in the footnotes of the book, which I think is a really interesting take. And Joe, I don't know if you want to maybe throw a little bit of scan so you can kind of see kind of what it is, like what the book entails, but the book is only available in paperback because that's how it engages you in the story. So it's supposed to feel really claustrophobic and really in your face because
Hmm.
some of the pages are like one word, so you're flipping through the pages as it's building tension to figure out what happens. Sometimes the format is written upside down or like written reverse or like everything's just crossed out. It's a blacked out page, and it's supposed to basically kind of go through like you're so committed to something that it drives you insane, or like these different elements keep happening to you and it's driving you further and further into insanity. Really great horror book. Could not recommend it enough. If I were to give you a one sentence plot, it is a story that's written in the footnotes of a manuscript about a movie that doesn't exist. And the movie's premise is that there's a family that lives in a house that is bigger on the inside than the outside. It's a lot.
Jeez.
It's a lot of layers going on to it, but fantastic read. I'm always so engaged when I read it. I haven't been able to get to it in a while, just because I've been busy with life stuff. But I'm gonna get back into it. And then another book that I want to read is part of H.P. Lovecraft. It's called Polaris, which is basically like some dude is looking at the northern lights and he falls asleep, and then like the story begins. So I don't know too much about it. I was recommended to me by one of my peers, so I'm gonna go and read that today, I think.
Ooh, today.
Yep. The good thing about
Nice.
like H.P. Lovecraft stories is they're like short stories, so you can probably read one in 1 or 2 days. So
Hmm.
I'm ready to get sucked in.
I'm ready to get hurt again. All right. So now that we've kind of learned your style or the style of reading that you like, the style of writing that you enjoy reading, do you think you'd incorporate that severe amount of creativity into your first book that you'd write? Or do you think you'd try to be like, I need to ease into this bad, Larry? Because when I first started writing, because I'm currently writing or trying to write two different books, because whenever motivation hits I work on one or the other. But I'm just struck by how much more difficult I thought it is than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I think that maybe I'll probably start with to kind of get my feet wet, right? Start writing short
Hmm.
stories again. Short stories are easy because they take you don't need to have a lot of world building and for what you need, right? Because you don't need to set up other characters elsewhere that are going to tie in later or other things. It's like more of like a grounded, this is the environment that the character is inheriting. This is their experience in their environment. That's like good. That's like a short story, So that's kind of. I think I would start there and then slowly make the stories less and less short until I get to like what I actually want to talk about. Because really, my biggest thing would be world building. I wouldn't want to read a book that I think has shitty world building, so I wouldn't want to write a book that I think has shitty world building. I
Sure.
don't know how to world build properly. That's something I'm gonna work on. So I think short stories will help. I think that I can write dialogue well. And I have a plot in my head that I think is really good. But I just don't know how to build around it, and I think that's a very important piece that I'm missing. So I think I would start
Hmm.
off small, just like conversation with two friends in a coffee shop, something like that. That's the kind of the stuff I used to write stuff like that.
Do you
Um,
like jazz?
do you like jazz music, son? Yeah. But I think that that would be a good starting point, and then branch out. Yeah. So
Nice. All right.
yeah. All right. So
Um,
do you want to talk a little bit more about like you said you were writing two books? Do you want to tell us a little bit about one of them?
yeah. So I originally started writing a Star Wars novel. No, shocker there, I know, to everyone who's listened to the first two episodes. But, you know, upon realization, which I mean, I knew from the beginning, but I wasn't confirmed. But I found out officially that it is completely illegal to write Star Wars short stories. And the only way to be a published Star Wars author is to be requested to write a story. And I am telling myself that before I die, I will publish a Star Wars novel. So I have a great story, I think. I have a full three books already written and planned out. Not already planned out, not written. I am currently, what did I say, 17,000 words into the first book. So I've gotten that. But then it's kind of come to the point where you realize you're never going to be allowed to publish that book until you make other books that, garner attention from publishers and whatnot. So I started kind of writing like on a really stressed day. I was having a real bad day when I thought of this book. Horrible day. I ended up taking a beach chair, driving to the beach, and just plopping down and sitting there with a little notepad in my hands. And I started writing stuff down because I was so stressed and I just felt like I couldn't escape from the weight. And so I just started writing a story about, I don't want to give too much away because y'all might steal my sick story, all our viewers here, but it's kind of a story about a person who reaches the end of a journey that is supposed to be short lived, I'll say, and they struggle with finding direction afterwards. And there's a lot of similarities to actually the book you mentioned, Jake, where it's like it's uniquely written. It's not, I would say it's not super traditional, not nearly as much as the one you're referring to. It's like upside down, one word, but it's more, it has like a touch of the main character, like he's actually the one writing it in a journal, and it discusses like anxiety and depression and like expectations and stuff, and so uh I think it's like a compelling story for the COVID generation right now, where people have just been so stressed. So that one will be tough to write. I think it's not my traditional fantasy writing that I would love, and I'm sure I'm going to have to dive into my own psyche and think of some unpleasant things to kind of relate and go through all this. But I would think it'd be kind of a, I don't know if entertaining is the right word. That's my problem. Do you think books like that, Jake, would be entertaining for a widespread audience, or does it take a special person to enjoy these like uh, deep dives in psychology and stuff like that?
I think that you know,
In a fictional book, though, of course, in a
in,
fictional
yeah.
book.
So like, I think in terms of outreach, it depends the story you tell. So like obviously you have like these like young adult books or fantasy that are in a specific genre. Like romance, dark like fantasy, adult, yeah, like young adult mystery. You're gonna attract that specific niche audience, and then in terms of like widespread story, it's really about the quality of your story rather than the category. But people might be more or less hesitant to pick up the book depending on the category. So if you're something that wants to write about like mental health and the effect on society that contributes to that, which it sounds a little bit like kind of what you're writing about, um,
Yeah,
then I
yeah.
think I think that there's a certain niche genre for or a certain niche for like really any book that would be interested in that, and then from there you kind of rely on word of mouth to get it widespread. I don't think that it's a I don't think that there's a single book out there that's for everybody, right? Because people like and dislike different
Sure.
things. But I think that if you're willing to tackle mental illness and you do it well, it's a book that will probably gain a lot of traction because a lot of people experience those. But it really comes to relatability and kind of your initial, I guess, genre.
Yeah, I'll explain to you more a little bit when we hop off the the filming set, but um, it it's definitely not. I don't know if I'm excited to write the Star Wars book. Every day I sit down and write, which should be more frequently, but it's not. But every time I sit down, it feels great to just have the story kind of like spill out of you. But on the other one, it's it feels like work. I won't lie. It's not a story. I mean, it is a story, but it's not a story. It's more just a life of someone who's struggling and and almost like their fall into a further dark place, and then examining the human spirit and what they can do to escape that if they can.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's that's a very powerful message and could be a very inspiring book for people, especially those that are struggling with that sort of thing, mental health or like financial burdens or stuff like that. I think that's like a really good that's a really good genre to start from, and like I would obviously read it, you know.
Heck yeah,
Um,
you could be the first one.
but I think that you kind of raise an interesting question with like is this book gonna be popular? Is like would that weigh your decision about what you're gonna write about? Would you want your work to be which I guess it's more of like the difference of like, do you want to write a work, because you want other people to read it, or do you want to write a story,
Ooh.
just like your story, and like regardless? Because I know for me, if I were to write a book, I wouldn't care if it's published because I would just be happy that I was able to like put a story down on paper and actually like make something. Whereas I
Hmm.
think that you actually would just be like, yeah, publish it, everybody read it, let's go, kind of thing. So
Yeah, I wish I was more like you because I think that's where more of the success comes from. But so for people who don't know me, which is everyone most likely listening to this, I have a very hard time doing something and not expecting it to do it to like the utmost degree. Not to say like Jake's like being casual. I'm not saying that. I just mean like the second I touch
filthy
something,
casual.
I feel like I have to. I have no other choice but to try to get like published for a book, basically. And like if you play a sport, you have to try to play it professionally or not play. It's a horrible habit. It's not like me like oh I'm great. It's just it's something that I wish I didn't do, but I do. So if I were to write a book, I would need it to be published, not just because of that reason, but a more like genuine reason is because I want people to enjoy it. Like I want to write something that makes people feel something. So if I write a book and it's never gets read, then I'll be heartbroken because then I wouldn't have achieved my goal of making people feel something and taking away some of their daily stress. So for that reason alone, like even ignoring the other part, yes, I would need people to read it, but I think that it means I'll just have to work harder to make a book that people would actually enjoy reading.
That's no, that's fair. Yeah, I think more of me. I'm just like the the probability of me actually finishing the book that if I start is so low that I'd just be happy with having it written and just like actual the whole story just like written somewhere. You know what I mean? And like obviously, I would try to get it published because it'd be stupid if you have this whole novel or this whole original world that you built like I would at least try to get it published, because it's just like
Sure.
it's the next logical step, right? You have a story written, try to bring it to an editor to see if they'll take it on. But if it doesn't, I'm not gonna be destroyed by it. Like if people think my book sucks, I'm gonna be like, that hurts. That certainly hurts, but like I'm just happy that I'm just happy it exists,
Ouch, my feelings.
Yeah, ouch, my feelings hurt a lot, but I think for me the important thing is that like I made something creative, and I use writing, or I used to use writing in the past. Now like I said, I don't really have time much anymore as a creative outlet to kind of escape my realm of the world and like all of it's if it's weighed on me. I used to write to kind of create a different world that like if I were the main character I could live in and be like, all right, well this is either way worse that doesn't make my reality seem that bad,
Yes.
or
Yes.
it's something better that I can just dip myself into to escape.
Oh yeah,
That's
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so that again, it would hurt a lot if people are like, Jake, your book absolutely
A
sucks.
lot.
Hurt a lot. But at the end of the day, I'd be happy that I did, regardless of the result.
I mean, I think that's the best way to be. You see all these popular writers or directors or even social media people nowadays been saying this a lot. They're like, we made our story content, whatever you want to call it, just because we enjoyed it, and we didn't really care where it went. And that's how I think most successful people are, because you just make something you love, and that means you can keep up with it and stick to it, and then it will grow. So that's kind of what we were discussing with this. I don't know what we even call this, podcast show, channel, YouTube. It really all depends, because we're uploading these things kind of everywhere. But when we decided to make this thing, it's just because we don't see each other as much anymore, because we're all moving away, doing our own thing, and we're all very creative people, and we like to make our opinions known, and we like to have these like quick meetings where we discuss what we're going to be talking about, and it's a creative outlet. It keeps us connected, and if it say we get a bunch of listeners, that'd be fantastic. I'd be happy. But at least if we do this and nobody ever listens, we do something that's fun, we do something that is creative, and we do something together. So I think that's the best way to be.
Oh yeah, no, I 100% agree. Yeah, when I was like, yeah, when we were sitting there eating pizza, like what, like 2 weeks ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we were like, let's finally do this. I think it was more for the thing, because if I guess kind of to relay the background for the viewers listening that may not know us, again, probably zero people that don't know us that are listening to this, but Joe, Lee, Justin, and then we have a couple other friends that might dip in and out in a couple episodes depending on the topics. We're all friends from college. We all went to college together. We've been out for almost half a decade, coming up on, and so we've been slowly kind of growing apart geographically.
I
We're
was
all
gonna say, hey, yo.
we're all in different states now. And one of the ways that we can stay connected through this is by meeting up for an hour or two a day to making just a couple episodes, or not a day, a week, to talk about these things that we were passionate about in kind of a format that we would have in a normal conversation that we would be if we were just sitting down getting drinks or stuff like that. So that's the reason why we did this, and inevitably why I was very static. And it's actually we actually have episodes that are going to be released, is simply for us to help stay connected as friends. And as a side effect, if people enjoy it, that's fantastic. But like, we really made this to stay together, stay close. So that kind of adds. Hopefully, that I contribute a little bit to that conversation. But
No, it does, yeah. Because if people are listening and thinking this is disingenuous, like if we were together right now, we would be discussing stuff like this 10 out of 10. We talk about this stuff nonstop. We just argue about it, and then we just, I don't know, talk about stuff in life. This is all we do. Like most people, I guess. I don't think we're like special. We're like, ooh, you talk about movies, so you're such a hipster. But this is just what we do. We just decided to record it while we did it.
yep, that's I mean, that's why we did it. Not to be disingenuous, but we didn't do it for you guys. At least not right now. If this gets big, then that's something else. But for right now, small
We did
scale.
it for you.
We did it for you the whole time. Yeah, we're doing this for us to stay friends and talk about things. I mean, Joe and I. One of the reasons why we're doing this episode where it's just Joe and I is because we've had conversations back and forth talking about us writing books, so we've been bouncing ideas off each other. Um, and then
Oh yeah, you guys should have seen some of the lengths of the calls that we had when we first kind of got to this point. Um, it was just hours and hours and hours of telling each other our plot lines, and then the changes we made, and then input, and then we might change again, or we get input from somebody else and we push it back. Like, what if? Wait, but why did this make sense? And oh yeah, these book talks have been a long time in the past, and there will be a long time in the future.
yep, and then hopefully we'll get to the point where we'll be a little bit more, a little bit more brave to tell you guys, specifics about our stories. But we're not there yet. We're still very novice writers, and we're kind of looking forward to the future. And today we just want to get on and talk a little bit about what is inspiring us to write and some of the things that we're going to take inspiration from in the future. So I hope you guys
Uh,
enjoyed the episode. That's all the time we have today. Joe, you have any closing remarks?
yes, because I'm feeling super motivated right now. Today is September 18th of 2022. I just checked. I will make a promise that before Oh, September 18th, 2023, I will have a full novel written. That is my guarantee.
Wow. That's
My guarantee, what no matter what it is, whether it's Star Wars, the mental health book, or anything else, I will have a full novel written in a year's time. That I promise to all the viewers, all you non-existent people in the world that hopefully show up eventually in life.
all three of
I will
you.
I will write a book before the year is up. I'm saying it right now.
All right, we're gonna hold him. We're gonna hold him to it. I will make no such promise, but I will try my best to get one started. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of Broadcast Bros. If you guys have any recommendations for anything that we can talk about in the future, feel free to contact us or comment on the video, and we'll see. We'll try to mix that in as best we can, because inevitably, yeah, we also want this to be driven by you guys. If you guys have any suggestions of what we talk about, it helps us not have to think of topics all the time. So
Yes,
your input would
please.
be greatly appreciated, as well as things that can change. All right, thank you guys very much for tuning in for this episode of Broadcast Bros, and we'll see you in the next one.
Peace.